Welcome back to another episode of Kicking It with Coach Red, where we bring you all the news, stories, takes, and opinions about your favorite teams from the Pacific Northwest, from the good to the bad to the Mariners.
The sweet, sweet Mariners, baby.
No Mariners Monday today.
Nope.
We are excited about things, but we are going to hold off until Wednesday evening to give you our Wednesday installment of Mariners Monday on a new day.
Mariners Wednesday.
Congratulations. We're going to be talking a little bit about the draft class for the Seattle Seahawks. 8 picks in total throughout this draft, and not as much movement as I thought could have potentially happened. By the draft as a whole, Seahawks made a couple of moves, but not too many in this draft this year. So, but before we break that down, why don't I tell you a little bit about us? If you're looking for a guy that feels like I know these players a little bit. I feel like I got a little bit of sports knowledge. If we're going to harken back to a great TV show, could have been a contestant on Stump the Schwami or Stump the Schwab. The Schwami was the guy. If you're looking for a guy like that, maybe you're looking for a guy like me, your boy, Coach Red. You can find me on X at The Real Coach Red, on Instagram at The Real _ Coach Red, TikTok at The Real Coach Red. Also, find the show over on YouTube. Search Kicking In with Coach Red. Like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, leave a comment or two. And if you're looking for a guy, he knows a little bit about these players, and he's going to sprinkle that in as he can, but he wants to get to know him a little bit better. A Mr. Rogers type. Won't you be my neighbor? Because he's going to learn a little bit about you. And if you're looking for a guy like that, you're looking for a guy like Cain.
Yes, I am Kane. You can find me over on Twitter at Kane2406, on YouTube at Kane06, TikTok Kane0624. Ugh, a little blunder there. Also follow the show's socials over on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Red Pod. False. Do it.
If you listened or watched our last installment of the mock draft, you would know that we correctly predicted who the Seahawks were going to pick at 16th. It was unprecedented. First 14 picks off the board, all on offense, huge run on tackles, wide receivers, and quarterbacks. 6 in the first 12 for quarterbacks was wild. Edge Latu goes at 15. So realistically, the Seahawks kind of had the pick of the litter of what their need positions were. You had Dallas Turner still available at the edge if you want him. You had Troy Fantanu sitting there.
I mean,
You had the possibility to move back, but they stayed and they selected Byron Murphy II out of Texas, just like we had predicted. And it's a pick that just made too much sense. When you look at the position, he's primarily an interior guy, can flex out to that inside edge in the 3-4 a little bit. But when you look at that position for the Seahawks, do they have a need immediately? No. You signed Jonathan Hankins, you have Jaron Reed, but both of those guys are going into the last year of their deals. Hankins was a 1-year deal, Reed going into year 2 of a 2-year deal. Byron Murphy II does a lot of things for you. He gives you a value pick. There was a lot of smoke coming up to the draft that he could have been the first defensive player taken as early as in the top 10 was what I heard thrown out there. And when you look at, I looked at a few different prospect ranking sites, ESPN, Pro Football Focus, and CBS. ESPN had him as the 14th best prospect. Pro Football Focus had him at 12, and CBS had him at 15. So you get some value there as well.
And, I heard some rumblings, after Michael Penix while Penix was going. I was listening to NFL Network commentary, and they were saying the Seahawks were in play to move up to get Penix.
They squashed it after the draft.
And, that was just of the rumor mill and all that. I am very happy with this pick because it adds to a different competitiveness to this defensive front, and what Coach Mack is going to get out of this dude is going to be crazy.
Well, with him, he's primarily a run stuffer with pass rush upside. I think from my research, his win percentage on passing downs was the best mark out of interior defensive linemen in college football this year. And you saw that. He had a pretty solid game against the University of Washington in the college football playoff. And what I like about Byron Murphy is he does have that little bit of nasty, and he's a pretty damn good athlete. And the one thing that I'm excited about that could be coming back to your Seattle Seahawks is defensive lineman playing fullback. He's caught a touchdown pass. He's had a rushing touchdown in college. For what the man does at plus 300 pounds and the way he moves, it's insane. Like, he's got some heavy hands, he's got that fierceness. And when you look at this team, he's a different type of player. He's got a higher athletic profile than Jaron Reed and Jonathan Hankins. Probably some more similar to Jaron Reed when he was drafted, but Jaron Reed's a little bit older now. And ESPN gave his pro comp as Justin Matabuke, who just so happened to flourish with Coach Mack over at the Ravens.
Right. And just got mega paid. So
So
yeah, I
give
expect
me
good
up
things
to
out of
5 years of Byron Murphy the second on a rookie deal and see what he can do with this team. And I had a feeling that this was going to go defense. John Schneider in his first draft, you're sitting there and you've got a defensive minded head coach. Go ahead and go get him a guy that fits his scheme, gives him that player type so you can give him the best opportunities to succeed, especially when you sat there and looked at this team where the defense was the downfall the last couple of years. And I saw some jackwagon on X post something where it showed the Seahawks defensive line from like a year and a half or 2 years ago, and then showed the team as it's currently constructed, which is basically what they had last year plus Jonathan Hankins and Byron Murphy the second. And they're like top five defensive line in the NFL. And I was like, no, because they weren't that last year. I'm gonna need
Oh,
to see some things. I'm gonna need to see
well,
Draymond Jones be a little bit more splashy. But I think that with Byron Murphy pairing up with Big Cat, Draymond Jones, Jaron Reed, Jonathan Hankins, this gives you more versatility, and you can keep these guys fresh and hopefully
and,
go make a bigger impact on the
and
D
you're
line.
getting with Byron here too. You're getting a wealth of knowledge at the position. You have guys who have been in the league 8+ years, littered throughout it, except Draymond Jones excluded, right? Big Cat has been one of the most perennial run stuffers in the league for numerous years and for multiple different teams. So picking his brain is going to also improve, I mean, how this kid pans out. And it's something that this team needed. And the NFL Network said it as soon as Latu Latu was taken, the draft begins now, right? Because you kind of knew all the offensive guys were going. Just it was a matter of where, right? So after all the offensive run is really when the draft started, because then you saw a lot of sprinkled in there.
Mm.
So great pick.
Well, and you talked quite a bit about Leonard Williams already, and that's what the Seahawks were doing the entire second round without having that pick that they gave up to acquire Leonard Williams and able to re-sign him. Was they just had to keep reminding themselves, we don't our second round pick is Leonard Williams, our second round pick is Leonard Williams. Then you get into the third round, they hit a position in need. Christian Haynes, guard out of the University of Connecticut, was picked
Yes.
at 81st overall. ESPN had him ranked at 70. Pro Football Focus had him at 60, and CBS had him at 50. As a true guard, not a guy that played tackle in college that projects as a guard, he was pretty much the unanimous guard prospect that was a strict guard in college. Reading some stuff, All American, 4 year starter, did not give up a sack in the last 2 years at UConn. I think he gave up like two or three his freshman year, one his sophomore year, and didn't give up a sack. This guy is big. He's got big hands. He infuriates defensive linemen. I saw the clip going around when I think it was the Jaguars we're hyping up. I think it's Mason Smith. Like, look at the tenacity that we got. And it was his clip uh, during the Senior Bowl, and it's Christian Haynes just stonewalling him. So he rips off his helmet and throws it to the ground. And Christian Haynes is just sitting there like, just another rep for me, baby.
Yeah, this is the pick I was just super hyped for because you've added depth, right, with Lincoln Tomlinson
Well, Lakin
and
Tomlinson slots in. He's played left guard exclusively, and with Christian Haynes,
Ooh.
he's played right guard exclusively in college. So you don't have to
Mhm.
play with that. It does. You have Anthony Bradford. He
Really,
started
yeah.
10 games for you, so there's that competition aspect there. So I think that it's
I
really
just
between can Haynes get up to speed enough to get that starting job right out of the jump, as opposed to Anthony
right,
Bradford.
but they've gotten depth pieces on the O line throughout the offseason. I just think this was a steal. I saw that most personalities rotating to sports on the internet were saying that Christian Haynes was the steal of the draft, or at least in the third round. Projected at, I believe, second best guard in the
Well,
entire draft.
it's tough to say because you've got so many of these guys that are interior offensive linemen where
Right.
you've got like Jackson Powers Johnson that was seen as interior offensive line, preferably at center, could play guard. Same thing with Graham Barton, who played guard
Mm-hmm.
center tackle. And then you look at Troy Fantanu, who projects as a guard. So you had obviously guys that were higher graded, but when you looked at true guard, he was
Yes.
probably the top one in the draft.
Right. And so, and as you touched on, right, he hadn't allowed a sack in the last 2 years.
But we're
That's
also talking about
ins.
UConn, which isn't necessarily the best football school and not playing the best competition. But he did have a
Mm-hmm.
NFL pedigree. Jim Moore was the head coach there, who's coached at UCLA. I believe he coached at UW for a little time. He had a little sprinkle there with the Seahawks. He said,
Right.
"This is a guy that's going to play 14 years in the league."
Right. And that's something you like to see. Um, but just as you said, big man, big hands. He's gonna be pesky on the defenders, and it's just something I love to see.
And then you had the Seahawks that were slated to pick with the second pick in the fourth round. And that did not happen because Denver just loves trading with the Seahawks, and they had to reunite Bobo Nix with his boy Troy Franklin. Had to get them back paired together. So the Seahawks end up picking up Denver's through New Orleans, fourth round pick, a fifth round pick, which they did not have, and an additional sixth round pick, which I think was a big key for them acquiring more people because going into this, I mean, that's two less picks that you're dealing with. Actually, no, they gave up a seventh, but you got to move up a little bit more. So when they did that move back, they hit another position of need because you look at the linebacker room right now, you've got Tyrell Dotson on a 1 year deal. You have Jerome Baker on a 1 year deal, and you've got John Radican, who's primarily just played special team snaps for you, a little bit of linebacker in a pinch. So they go and get a guy, Tyrese Knight, linebacker out of UTEP. And this one was kind of the first head scratcher for a lot of different pundits. So this is pick 118. ESPN had him ranked at 198th. Pro Football Focus did not have him ranked in their top 300, and CBS had him ranked at 171. Talked a little bit before the broadcast here. He does have some good traits. He's solid in zone coverage, except when he's got a little bit of extra speed flashing across him. That'll give him some trouble. He's very instinctual against the run, but sometimes gets a little bit too focused and gets a little lost in the sauce and doesn't read and scrape. A little bit of that is he's playing on his athleticism and
Mm-hmm.
sound tackling, but he is not a guy that really wows you with the speed. He doesn't have that speed aspect, but he did lead college football in solo tackles this last year and clocked in with 140 total. He's had some pass breakups. He's had some sacks. So he gives you that developmental piece to go behind
Mm-hmm.
those two starters. This is a guy that will play a lot on special teams. He'll probably be on every single one. But I think when you pick a guy on the fourth, more often than not, they're going to make the team. And when you look at the way that the Seahawks are currently constructed, them not having a lot of depth at the linebacker position, I think that there were some guys that I liked a little bit better. I think Jeremiah Trotter was still hanging out on the board, who was a little bit splashier at Clemson, but you're looking for tools and traits that Mike McDonald's really looking for. So if they
Mhm.
trust the process, I'll trust them until the new iteration of John Snyder and Mike McDonald lets me down.
I can agree with that.
All right. Part of the trade down, you get pick 121. It's where they go and get Lil Harbaugh, our special teams coordinator, get someone from the University of Michigan, AJ Barner, tight end. At pick 121, ESPN had him ranked at 139th best prospect. You had Pro Football Focus having him at 213, and you had CBS at 147. He's a guy that didn't get a lot of route running experience in college because of the heavy rushing offense that you saw at the University of Michigan.
Mhm.
But this guy comes out as probably one of the best inline blockers coming out of the draft. And he has that potential. He's a long strider. He's a guy that does have soft hands. They highlighted him in the national championship game, and I think he made a big play in that game too. I think he scored a tutty in that game, or at least a big completion. But I think you have untapped potential there. And when you look at a guy they currently have on the team in Farrell Brown, I think he kind of profiles as Farrell Brown with more pass catching upside just because he hasn't been asked to do it from his time in college. But when you look at, you can move him around a little bit. You can put him in H back if you want to run that. But if you're going to run in a two tight end set, this could be your guy that'll anchor and let Noah Fant go out and run those routes a little bit more. But that true guy that has that ability to develop. And this is kind of a sweet spot for tight ends that kind of stick around the league. Third, fourth round, they might not be the most prolific guy in the pass game, but they can stick based on the tools that they have. And from everything I'm seeing, this guy is super stout and run blocking and played a bunch of special teams for Michigan. So you know that Jay Harbaugh is just loving him to come in and be an immediate contributor on special teams.
Right. And then, you can kind of throw out that two tight end set, throw him in there as a blocker while Noah Fant's running a route and stuff. So it just gives you more options to do more plays with, right?
And I think it
It,
gives you the option to potentially, it's not like you gave a bunch of money to Pharaoh Brown. I think that it gives you the opportunity for him to take those snaps and possibly walk away from some of that Pharaoh Brown money.
right. And so I like this pickup, get that championship mentality in him already. So just get another tight end in the room. Nothing bad about it. Love to see it.
Yeah. Then they, as part of the trade down, they get the first pick in the fifth round, and they go down at pick 136 to Auburn, pick up Nehemiah Pritchett, cornerback out of Auburn, like I said. So at 136, ESPN had him ranked as the 153rd best prospect. You had Pro Football Focus had him at 180, and you had CBS having him at, see if I'm looking at my numbers here right, 147. No, no, 103. So, depending on who you look at, could have been a little bit of a reach, could have been a little bit of value pick. What I do know about him is he's a straight burner that excels in press coverage. He's 6 foot tall, which is usually a little bit shorter than the Seahawks typically look at the corner position, but he does have good length in the arms. He's got a good punch and press coverage. He has the versatility to play zone, but there are times in my read up on him where he'll stay in his back pedal a little bit too long and could be susceptible to quick breaking routes where he stayed in that back pedal a little bit too long. But this is a guy that if he does get beat right off the jump, he can use his speed to get back in phase, if you will, and really be an asset to this team. I do think it will be tough for him to get playing time. This is another guy that should have early special team reps if he makes the team because you're sitting there with that blazing speed. But when you look at the cornerback room as it's currently constructed, where you've got Trey Brown, Mike Jackson, Spoon, and Reek, it's going to be tough to crack that without any injuries, right? So, and Artie Burns is still in that. So
That's
he's
true.
going to
He
have to do
is.
some work to get some playing time, but he's the type of guy that should be able to have his game translate easily to a gunner on punt or blasting down on kick.
Yep. Yeah, yeah.
All right, going into round 6, pick 179. Going to Utah. This one is a fun one. Satanoa Lorena, guard prospect, played tackle 1 year in college, 4 year starter for the Utes. Started 3 years at right guard and played 1 year at right tackle this last year. Pick 179. You had ESPN had him at prospect 111. Pro Football Focus had him at 221, and CBS had him at 122. Good value. And I looked at the draft network. They had him as a day 2 pick as an adequate starter. Same thing with Nehemiah Pritchett, AJ Barner, Christian Haynes. All these guys were day 2 adequate starters right off the jump for them. I think that this guy brings more nasty than Haynes. He's got a little bit more beef behind him, and watching him pull in some of the clips that I've seen, he just flat backs some linebackers that are trying to make a play in the hole. Big, nasty. He played tackle last year, but he said, I see myself as an interior guy. I have that mentality. Where he struggled at in college, especially his last year, was a speed rush from edge defenders. Guess what? You don't have as much speed rush in the interior. So I think that he's going to be a guy that battles with Haynes, Bradford, primarily for a backup spot as we sit, and has the potential to make this team. I think the guy that we picked up from the Rams, who's got like 8 total snaps at guard, I think that was just a depth piece in case things went tits up in the draft. But I think that when you look at Haynes and Lorena, I think that this is a big upgrade. And you get a guy where you look across the board, except for Pro Football Focus, and it was a massive steal across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Sorry. I just looked over at the Mariners game. I saw a stat. So sorry, I'm a little sidetracked here.
Okay, well, let's go back to Auburn then. Pick
All right.
192. Let's go back to their DB room. Why don't we? DJ James, cornerback out of Auburn, pick 192. ESPN had him at 138, a little bit better than Nehemiah Pritchett. You had Pro Football Focus also had him rated higher than Nehemiah Pritchett at 153. And CBS also had him higher. They had him as their 70th best prospect. What you don't see out of DJ James that you see out of Nehemiah Pritchett is top flight speed. This is a guy that also has that versatility, but he doesn't have that top flight speed or as much length to him. So it makes it a little bit harder. He's a little bit stouter, a little bit shorter, but this is a guy that was a multiple year starter for Auburn. And like I said, it was kind of weird in this draft because you had a lot of cornerbacks on this team that have played significant time. And when you look at the safety room, you've got Kayvon Wallace, who I think slots in that safety rotation, Julian Love, Rayshawn Jenkins, Kobe Bryant, and God, I've said his name so many times. Jarek Reed II, guy that was phenomenal on special teams for us last year before getting a knee injury. And you expected him to potentially get a little bit more run and a little bit more play this year. So when you looked at that top flight talent that you have in your cornerback room, I would have liked them to go and get another young developmental type safety. But if they felt good enough about that DB room, where they said they had similar grades on Pritchett and James, at least the Seahawks did, and they said for him to just be available, it was too good of a value to pass up.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think that through 6 and 2/3 of the draft, right? Because we haven't gotten to the last pick. I think John really just got in his bag of tricks, man. I think that
He loves DBs, just like Pete Carroll. They love
right.
DBs.
And I get that, right? It's just a lot of depth pieces. You kind of see and evaluate through rookie minicamp and see how they can compete, see how if they're better than let's say a Kobe Bryant or maybe you transition them to safety, or at least one of them,
Well,
right?
and Kobe's already made that transition into the safety room.
If you said no type flight speed, right, you could probably see DJ James slide into that strong safety role.
Potentially, he's a little bit small for it though.
Right.
All right, last pick for the Seahawks, pick 207. In the sixth round, they take Michael Gerald, tackle out of Finlay, smaller type school player, and ESPN had him ranked at 391. Pro Football Focus did not have him ranked, and CBS did not have him ranked as well. This is a developmental type guy playing at a smaller school. He's a guy that was in on a top 30 visit, and his relative athletic score, I think, was a 992. The dude
Really
is
good.
the dude is good. And afterwards, they asked John Snyder, when you look at these smaller type school players, you got to look at the level of competition that they're playing against. And John Snyder said he dominated like we expected him to dominate against that level of competition. And this guy is maybe not someone that makes the squad, maybe get stashed on the practice squad to develop because he is going to need to make some changes, but his athletic profile should lend pretty well to this team. I think that he's fighting Stone Forsyth for a roster spot. It's going to be interesting to see how Abe Lucas comes back, but I think bringing George Fant back into the fold, like I would lean more towards Fant to get the early looks than Stone Forsyth. But this is a guy in Drell that was that's a beast, dude. He's a big player. If you can
Mhm.
tweak a few things early on in his developmental process, and when you look at a guy that's put a ton of guys in the league, first round picks in Scott Huff at his time at UW, there's
Exactly.
one this year. You've had Caleb McGarry going first as well. You're just a guy that has had a lot of success with guys going into the league. So I expect him to make those changes and put themselves in a position to maybe sneak on the roster. But I think that with him being that smaller school guy and really the only sample size you're going to see is partial preseason games. If he doesn't make the initial roster, I think this is a guy that can stick on the practice squad and really be that elevation, especially if Abe Lucas is going to miss an extended period of time.
Right. I just think all in all, they killed the draft. I know they're as you said, when they took Knight, it's when you start scratching the head and all. But I think that with the coaches that they have on this team, you're going to get the best, I think, out of these players. And I think you're going to see an elevation to the entire team. You're just going to see a whole different team come out this year than you saw, you know, out of years prior.
Well, and they prioritize the trenches. I'm going to include AJ Barner as an inline tight end as a trench player
Mm-hmm.
for this. 5 of the 8 picks were in the trenches, and that excludes a linebacker and 2 corners, right?
Yeah.
The offense was all along that straight inline type of players. Things that didn't happen in this draft, no wide receiver taken. So you're feeling good about Bobo and making a little bit more noise. They didn't take a running back, which I thought could be a little off, especially because we didn't see anything with McIntosh last year. Rashad Penny was in the building for a visit. John Snyder was pretty mum on that, but I was kind of expecting them to take a flyer on somebody, or
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved, especially with what you saw at the end of the year, signing Dylan Johnson as a UDFA instead he signs with the Titans because you saw what he was to this team and you saw how much that Scott Huff's guys loved grading for him. But we did have a
Yeah.
couple of UDFAs that made some sense for this team. First one we're gonna go over is Little Tonga.
Well, he
Big
didn't get signed. He is invited to the rookie minicamp.
And that's interesting because you do have Sam Howell on this team. Maybe he's a guy that can make the practice squad. He was in college for what seems like forever. He was trying to get an extra year of eligibility. Did not happen, but he's the Big Ten's all-time passing yardage leader.
Shocker.
I mean, it. He started his career at Alabama, so
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But as you were dancing and alluding to, Jack Westover getting signed to
Yeah.
this team is money. And I think
I think he has a
what I
good
was
chance of
trying to
making the team.
not what I was trying to bury the lead earlier when we were talking about AJ Barner, how I thought that he could be a Pharaoh Brown plus some extra receiving help. I think that if you can get out of that money, Jack Westover can make this team. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
the dude's a vacuum. He's a safety net. He's that security blanket. When your dog gets scared by thunder, you throw the thunder blanket on him. He's your dog's thunder blanket, baby. From the
Yeah.
from the University of Washington Dogs, Jack Westover, thunder
I
blanket.
love this so much. I was at my best friend's house after the draft. I was hurrying to find UDFAs. And as soon as I saw Jack Westover's name, I said he's making the team. He will make this team.
He's going to be the Jake Bobo. He's going to be your UDFA that makes the team. And I think
He,
that
I love
with
him.
them drafting AJ Barner, that makes Pharaoh Brown a little bit less of a lock
Yes.
for this team. And it's
Yes.
going to be a roster crunch battle between Brown and Jack Westover, in my opinion. And I
And your
pray
offensive coordinator already has some experience with good old Westy.
the only thing that I'm worried about is how his knee's holding up after the offseason procedure that was done and how ready he's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's not going to be ready, that's a guy that you can put on your injured list to keep him around, right? For that
Right.
full first year. So
Mm-hmm.
love it all the way around. And the thing is, we aren't going to know how these guys are going to pan out in the league for at least a couple of years. Everyone that throws out these grades, I think ESPN had them graded as a B minus, and then you had the NFL.com had the Seahawks as one of the 3 A's of the draft. So there's so much variation. And it's depending on what you're looking at, what you're looking for, who reached, who makes the most sense, player fit, all of these things. Where I think the Seahawks address their biggest areas of need. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this whole team fits in with the schematic changes, moving away from Clint Hurt and Pete Carroll and moving to Mike McDonald and Arden
Right.
Durde, right? And then how is this going to look different from the Shane Waldron led offense to the Ryan Grubb? So
Right.
there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of players that we're going to figure a lot about. And it's going to be interesting to see the guys that were already on the roster. Do their games get elevated? Do their games take a step back with the new coaching staff? It's going to be awesome. And that's why you love the NFL draft. That's why I said it's must see TV. These,
Yes.
these individuals' lives are changed forever when they hear their name called. Not all of them are going to make rosters. Not all of them are going to make their way out of minicamp. They might see them in the USL or whatever they're calling the mixture of XFL. They might be playing in the CFL, but this is a time where you can get excited about these. You can get infuriated about these picks. But at the end of the day, it's not like we know a damn thing. I talked to guys that were in scouting departments. A guy that was with the Seahawks at the time when they had the draft of Malik McDowell, Delano Hill, Thompson at the safety position. And I go, who's the guy that makes sense? And he's like, Delano Hill is a starter in the NFL, and Delano Hill did not pan out. So injuries, scheme fits, player progression, all of these things
Mm-hmm.
factor in. But it's the offseason. The Seahawks were one game out of the playoff picture last year. So you have that hope, you have that optimism with what they've done in the offseason. I feel pretty good about
I
it
did too.
as a whole. And it's going to be fun. We'll get to see these guys in practice. We'll get to see some of these clips. Then we get into preseason. We'll break this thing down a little more and shoot. Here, probably next week, we might even make some nicknames for these fellas. Kane's favorite thing.
God damn it.
And God damn it, we love you to give us a follow on social media. You can find me, your boy, Coach Red, on X at the Real Coach Red, on Instagram at the Real _ Coach Red, TikTok at the Real Coach Red. Also, find the show over on YouTube. Search Kicking It with Coach Red. Like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, leave a comment or two. Kane, where you at?
You can find me over on Twitter at Kane2406, on YouTube at Kane06, TikTok Kane0624. Also follow the show's socials over on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Red Pod. Follow us. Do it, freaking do it!
And as always, stay fresh.
Stay fresh, peeps.
Peace.